Morning everybody. So this video is for students who are studying Eduqas English language, and we are looking at component 1 today. So the first exam, section A, the reading section, and this video is just going to cover questions 1 and 2, the two 5-mark questions. As a reminder for those of you that are taking the exam this summer, the exam is on Friday the 23rd of May. And this exam is an hour and 45 minutes long, and these are my suggested timings for the two sections of the exam. The exam board say spend 60 minutes on the reading section and 45 minutes on the writing section, and then this is how I would break down that hour that you have on the reading section. So there are varying opinions about whether it is important to read the text before you start answering. Overall, my advice would be that if you think you can read a page of A4 in 5 minutes, then go ahead and read the text before you start answering the questions. If you're a slower reader, then I would skip reading the text and jump straight into answering the questions, because hopefully, as you will remember, Eduqas break down each question so that you read each section of the text as you go, and the only question that you need to write about for the whole text is that final question. And in that final question, if there's anything left of the text for you to read, they ask you to read that before you start answering it. So these are suggested timings, and a lot of it will be about your wisdom about you as a reader and how fast you read, and it's very important that you do what works best for you and not worry too much about what everyone else is doing. All right, so let's jump straight into the first two questions. So question 1 is your 5-mark question, and for this question you are aiming to spend about 3 to 5 minutes on that question, and again, a lot of that will be dependent on how quickly you're able to read the text and how quickly you're able to select the relevant details. So it will always ask you to read a certain set of lines starting at the beginning. Sometimes it's just 5 lines, sometimes it's 10 lines. It will depend on the text that they've chosen. And then it will always be list 5 things. So the method for this question is I would draw a box around the lines, or at least box them in the margin. Highlight the question topic so you're not distracted by any of the other information in that first section, and then you want to track through the text, highlighting any relevant details. And once you get to 5, you can stop, and then you write up those details as 5 short, simple sentences as bullet points. And this is where component 1 differs from component 2. They do need to be written in sentences. All right, so let's have a look at an example. So this example says list 5 things that you learn about Lily, and I'm going to read this through really quickly because for the sake of time we are also going to use this passage as our example for question 2. So it says the late afternoon sun slanted through the windows of the tiny cafe, painting the wooden floors with streaks of amber light. Outside, the world moved slowly, soft footsteps on cobblestone, the occasional rustle of wind-blown leaves, but inside, the warmth felt like a secret haven. Lily sat alone at her favourite corner table, her back straight, but her fingers restless as they unfolded and unfolded the napkin in her lap. She wore a navy cardigan, sleeves pushed up, revealing a delicate silver bracelet that jingled when she moved, nervous energy in motion. At 28, Lily had spent the last 5 years working as a junior editor at the local publishing house, tucked into a brick building just 3 blocks away. Known for her quiet diligence and late-night emails, she was dependable to a fault, always the first to offer help, but the last to believe in herself. She still lived in her childhood home, a modest bungalow she inherited after her father passed away, and her life had, until recently, followed a steady, predictable rhythm. Thoughtful and hesitant by nature, Lily carried a quiet strength beneath her anxious smile. Today was important. She wasn't sure how to start, but she knew it had to be today. All right, so our question is list 5 things that you learn about Lily. And as you'll see from the next slide, you would not necessarily read the whole passage, because you would not necessarily need to highlight the whole passage, although you would need to read it. So for this question, generally, you are looking for the explicit factual details, the things that you can pick out without having to think too much about what they mean. And you can see here that I've gone through this and highlighted what I think are the 5 ones that would jump out to most students as they are reading. There are other things that you could have picked up and that wouldn't be a problem, and hopefully you will have gone through a question like this with your teacher and seen the mark scheme. And often on the mark scheme, even though you only need 5, there's about 15 different options, sometimes more than that. So there are lots of things that you could have picked out here. These are the 5 that I thought were most obvious. And then how do you write that up? So as I said before, you write this up as simple sentences as bullet points, and you go down your page like that. So we've got Lily sat alone. She wore a navy cardigan. She is 28. She has worked as a junior editor for the last 5 years. She is known for her quiet diligence and late night emails. All right, and that is as simple as that. Hopefully it should take you about 3 to 5 minutes. Depending on how long question 1 takes you, it kind of bleeds into your time for question 2, which is your second 5-mark question. And for this one, you're probably going to use a little bit more time. And so if you've only used sort of 4 minutes for question 1, you've then got 6 minutes to use for question 2. So again, it will give you a set of lines, and it will be on the passage where you're reading chronologically the next section. And again, it's going to be around 10 lines. And this question tends to ask, what impression do you get of a person, a situation, a relationship? It's not always what impression, but that is the thing that they are asking you to do, is to begin to do inference in this section. So again, you're going to box the lines, you're going to highlight the question topic, and then whatever the question is, you're going to go through highlighting any relevant details. So you're reading the next section of the text and you're highlighting more or underlining more information. And then for each quote, you need a short inference or impression. And then you write that up as 5 inferences with evidence. Your teacher might have called it inferences, they might have called it impression. Hopefully I'll describe what that means on the next slide. You'll see that it's the same thing, and you just need 5 of those for this 5-mark question. All right, so what does inference mean? So to get your 5 marks, you need 5 inferences with evidence from the text. With inference or impression, what they are asking you to do is to read between the lines to see what we learn about the person or the situation or the setting or the relationship. So generally what you're doing is looking for adjectives to describe the question topic. So it could be, if it's describing a person, they're proud or they're frustrated or they're lonely. You're interpreting from the information that we're giving. It doesn't just have to be single words, so it could be things like they're struggling to cope or they're finding life difficult. The key is that you are showing your understanding of what is implied. Now, for the sake of time and to try and keep this video short-ish, I am using the same passage about Lily, and the question is, what impression do you get of Lily? Obviously, in the exam, you won't be reading the same section. You'll be reading the next section, and they'll have given you something else to read and highlight. This time round, we're not going to pick up the same details because the factual details we picked up before about Lily were very clear and explicit. There's not too much to imply. So we're going to look at the other details that we can pick up about her. The idea that her fingers are restless as she's folding and unfolding, that she keeps moving. It describes her as having nervous energy. She's dependable to a fault, the last to believe in herself. Her life has been predictable up until now. So the question now is that we need adjectives and adjective phrases to describe what we learn about Lily from these lines, and we need 5. We're going to look for the inference. So let's show how this would be written up. All right, so you've tracked through the text doing it in order. You're going to try and use the word impression at least once because that's in the question. And then I like to structure this one using discourse markers, then the inference, then the evidence. If your teacher has told you to write this up in a different way, that is no problem at all. There are lots of right ways to answer this question. So we're going to start with, firstly, we get the impression that Lily is anxious, with fingers restless as they folded and unfolded the paper napkin. So I've got my discourse marker. I'm going through the text, tracking it in order. So I'm saying the first thing I found about her was this, and I've got my inference. I think the restless fingers as she folds and unfolds shows that she's anxious. You could have come up with a different word, nervous, apprehensive. Secondly, Lily seems unable to stop moving. She is on edge with her, and then my quote again, nervous energy in motion. So I'm using that quote that tells me that she's got nervous energy in motion, and I'm interpreting what it is that we learn about her. She can't move, she's on edge. Thirdly, Lily is described as taking her job very seriously. She's a hard worker, dependable to a fault, but she is also the last to believe in herself, which means she isn't overly confident in herself. And you can see with that sentence, I've actually ended up using the evidence first and put the inference afterwards. And that's because there is more than one right way to structure these sentences. The key is that you just need 5 of them. You should be writing 5 sentences for your 5 marks. Finally, Lily seems to have lived quite a boring life. Until recently, followed a steady, predictable rhythm. So there are a couple of things to note here. There's no further explanation needed. You don't need to unpick the language or zoom in on any words or pick out any of the techniques that are going on. And that's one of the rules of thumb that I like to remind students about for the questions in the reading section that are 2, 3 and 4. Question 5 is a little bit different because it's the whole text question, but in general you are getting 1 mark for each time you do an accurate inference with the supporting evidence. The second rule of thumb for this paper is that it's super important that you avoid selecting 2 pieces of evidence, so 2 quotes from the same sentence, unless it's a really long sentence where they're dealing with 2 very different aspects of the character. The rule that you want to go with is that you're only selecting 1 quote per sentence. All right, I hope you found that useful. I tried to keep it short. It's not that short. I will be doing questions 3 and 4 in my next video, and of course lots of literature videos on my YouTube channel as well, so do keep an eye and subscribe because apparently that helps. Have a good day.